And good morning, everybody. Hi, I'm Walter, and I'm the Dutch mentor, and it's again a Monday morning. And I'm here today with Katrijn van Oudheusden. She is a young lady and a very talented author and leader, for that matter, that I've met several years ago. And we spoke about her first book some time ago about selfless leadership, and she will certainly tell us a little bit more about that today. But she interestingly felt there was a need for a follow-up book called Beyond Illusion. And we will talk today a little bit more about why she wrote that, what she's trying to accomplish. And I'll read it to you because otherwise I don't want to mess it up, of course. Over here is that what we'll specifically explore today is the 6 illusions that cause our mistaken belief in a separate self. Just those words, right? Maybe there's 15 words there, but that's really deep. And I really challenge, people who want to go into leadership that we need to raise self-awareness. And I think that Katrijn has really done a wonderful job in her writings about challenging us and to think deeper and from a different perspective. So without any further ado, Katrijn, again, thank you very much for joining us today on our Monday morning chat about leadership. And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about the first book, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me again. So second book, and the first one we talked about, I think it was a year ago, it must have been, was Selfless Leadership. And since then, lots of things have changed and many things have stayed the same. So the thing I seem to do in the world at the moment is to try to communicate about this other paradigm, namely that this identity, this idea of a self or me, whether we see ourselves as a leader or not, right? This self-identity, that is a mental construct. And when we say that, everybody goes, well, yeah, I know that, so what? It's a construct, great. But we feel that it's real. And we feel also in leadership, for example, this focus on ourselves, which is automatic. We've learned this from the time we were very, very young children, to focus on ourselves and to believe and to build up this identity. This is my life. This is my self. I have to improve it. I have to develop it, and I have to get it right. And it is this basic assumption, because this is only a belief that we learn, that causes the stress and the worry and the anxiety, and that actually stops us from being selfless or servant leaders. So the reason is you cannot put others first. You cannot be a selfless leader if you are obsessed with yourself. And even if you're obsessed with yourself in a positive way. So if all day you're thinking about how can I serve others? How can I be this servant leader? How can I be a great and humble leader? Or whatever it is, whatever concepts you have, you are not there for others. And that is where we get hung up. So it's like an invisible ceiling that blocks us from transcending that and really being there for other people. And that's why I wrote Selfless Leadership, because for me, through insights, through working with others, it became clear that if we could deconstruct this idea of I'm a separate self and it's me versus you, and I need to, it's my life and I need to get it right, then there is much more freedom and openness to really be there for others. And so that's the first book with the 4 insights and 16 direct inquiry practices that, for example, you look at who am I really? What are my beliefs? Where do they come from? Why do I have beliefs? Are they really true? These type of exercises. And this can open a lot for people towards really being selfless without so much investment in a separate self. And then when I coached people around this and did a lot of communication around this, just many people said, well, yeah, okay, that's all great, but I'm not going there until I have some understanding of this. What are you even talking about? There is no separate self. Is this just something you're saying, or is there evidence? And then I would say things like, well, yeah, the science supports it, modern neuroscience and physics and philosophy. And I said these things, but I had no backup. So I realized, okay, I need to write another book. I need to write a second book, which is actually the prequel to Selfless Leadership. And it's an overview of some of the latest neuroscience, you could say, or cognitive science. Some of the thinkers around the idealist paradigm, which says that materialism, that there's an objective reality out there, is false or wrong. It's a wrong hypothesis. The thinking around consciousness being the substrate of reality instead of matter. And some of the older Buddhist understanding, Buddhist thought, because all of these areas, when you look at them, and I structured them in these 6 illusions, just to make it easier on us. When you look at all of that body of clues, I would say, because evidence maybe even is too strong, you're not going to be able to prove this. These are theories, hypotheses.
Mm-hmm.
You do, if you take them one by one, you do come to the conclusion that just believing that there is a separate self really is constructed by the brain. So it really is an illusion that we humans suffer under, because it limits us in ways that we don't even realize.
So very interesting, right? I mean, and it's so funny you said it is actually the prequel to the Selfless Leadership. Is that the thoughts that you, and I've come across a big, I've read a couple of books, certainly not to the standard of yours, but I try to share my experiences in that. And now that it's on paper, I really would like to go back and also say, listen, well, it actually needs a preamble. Right? It needs a little bit of explanation what that really all means. So yeah, a mentor taught me a long time ago, and it's part of the so the selfless leadership model that that I talk to my students about is about leading with confident humility. And one of the key things is to be outward thinking, not inward thinking. And we're stuck on this inward thinking, right? How am I placed? What's my position? How do I need to? But that is not really what it is about. It's about, the outward thinking that is really something that needs to be practiced over a long period of time. Now, somebody gave me an analogy. Actually, it was an analogy, or maybe I might have even seen it on TikTok, but it really kind of like, it made sense to me. Is that, we're so absorbed about self, about how we are positioned in the world, how we are being, how we think we're such an intricate part of the world that the world can function without us. And it really, all the time we spend making adjustments to make other people happy without making ourselves happy. Is that, somebody said, I want you to think about it from a different perspective. I said, put yourself in a position that, what do you think that happens when you die? And let's say you're a 45-year-old, very successful person in your role as let's say a director of whatever company you're at. Within days after you die, your job is going to be posted. Somebody's going to be sitting in your office. Within a month, that position has been filled, and you might be talked about once in a blue moon because some paper came up and your name was on the print. At home, people will be sad for the first 3-4 days, but even at the end of the funeral, after you barely have been placed in your grave, by the afternoon they're already having coffee and tea and sharing cookies and talking about the future. Within weeks after that, most family members don't really think about you anymore. Maybe your closest family members will hold you dear and will have a conversation or a fleeting thought. So think about all the things that you have talked about for yourself, about how much you want to please others, and forgetting about what it is that you really needed to do in life. All that is for nothing. Right, is if you really think about it, and that kind of struck home with me, is that we spend so much time on trying to please others rather than putting ourselves in a position of happiness, including how do we want to lead in an environment that you are talking about. So why don't you help, and I'm not sure that the analogy rings true to what it is that you're talking about exactly, but I think it really has, it has a shift of thinking in there that we need to think about the world and how we are placed in this world in a different way. So I'm intrigued by the 6 illusions. Would you mind just talking a little bit more about that? Because I think that will help people understand. And then we'll talk a little bit more about self-awareness and how that, what kind of exercises people can take to really get a little closer to what we're talking about today.
Yeah, so these, the illusion of being a separate self is what causes us to want to, for example, be a humble leader or to be a selfless servant leader. So it's not just to go into your previous statement about, I'm going to die, and there are more important things than the outside world. But the paradox or the almost ironical thing about it is that even our attempts to make this self more humble and better, and like, oh, I'm going to die, so I need to do the important stuff, that is also within this illusion. So that's why it's so key. It's like reaching a different level if you see that the whole thing is a construct, because then who's going to work on an illusion? What's the point?
Yeah.
And then you really become free to just be and to be in service. So the self is an illusion. That's great, but it's very complex. And to help, I kind of created these 6, and it's not just me, it's these authors whose work I quote, these researchers and experts. And it starts from the more obvious for many people to the more abstract. So the first one is the illusion of continuity, which is this belief that we're an identity through time, from birth to death, and that we are this narrative about ourselves. So through the course, from the time we're born to now, we've learned all these, we've had all these experiences, learned all these beliefs, and we have a narrative about ourselves. I am particularly good at maths, or I'm introverted, or my mother never loved me, or whatever it is that the narrative constructed. Because what some of these researchers are saying, like Anil Seth and Tom Oliver, who's more of an ecologist and looks at the social aspect of humanity, it's like this is a pure construct. This narrative self is created in the baby by the group. So it is actually the social group that you're born in that creates your identity. And we can imagine this if we were born somewhere else at a different time in history, we would have a completely different self.
Yeah.
So that's quite, people can follow, but still it's interesting to know that this whole story and identity we have is made up, really. It's what people told us we are.
Yeah.
And the second one is the illusion of corporeality, which basically just means the illusion of the body. And here it gets really interesting because what neuroscience is showing is that the brain hallucinates not just the body, but the outside world. So there is definitely an outside world. This is not negating objective reality, but what we see and how we experience that is the brain's best guess, as Anil Seth says. So it's a hallucination that allows us to survive in the physical world. And a scientist who goes a step further, and this is the beginning of the switch from materialism to idealism, is that what we see, including the body, are icons. They're representations of a vastly more complex reality, but our brains can't handle reality. They would fry if we would see all the information. So we perceive just enough to survive. So if I see an apple, a red apple, or a glass of water, we all see these same apparent or so-called objects because we evolved the same perceptions, the same sensory options as a species. But this is simply within sort of like a virtual reality, within a headset that we're stuck in, because that's the way we perceive reality. And now it gets really fascinating because that means that confirms some of the older Buddhist and Eastern wisdom, which is that this is you could say, a dream. It's a reality that is perceived as a type of hallucination constructed by our senses. And that brings us actually quite quickly to the third illusion, which is the hardest one for people to really grok, as they say, the illusion of volition. And there are endless debates, if you follow that, about free will. Do we have free will? Do we not have free will? But this, the illusion of volition, goes actually a step further and says there is actually no center within us that has free will, that has the option to have free will. We're a bunch of processes, a system running within a system. We're not separate from the environment. We're not causally separate. So whatever we do or think or act upon is this whole mass of systems variables coming together in that moment, most of it unconscious. And just because the thought appears along with it, I'm going to do something, we believe that we freely choose that. So,
and is it more instinctual than free thought?
No, it's not so much, well, you could say instinctual, but it's even worse in a way. It's, you know, whether it's instinctual or not, just there is no control center. It's like one of the metaphors used is we're born into a simulator, right? This hallucination, and we believe we're the pilot, piloting this simulation, but there is no pilot. So the pilot, you know, that can apparently do something in the simulation is also a simulation. And that's where it gets pretty abstract, but that's the mirror of this are the practical exercises in the book Selfless Leadership that can show you, you know, because if you examine, for example, how you make decisions, if you really look at that carefully without beliefs, but observe during the day, how does this come up? You start to see, oh, wait a minute, maybe this pilot, you know, isn't really there.
Yeah.
So we're on number 3, and there are 3 more to come. And this is where it gets pretty abstract, but also paradigm shifting. Because when you ask people on the street, right, why are you a separate self? Or why do you believe you're a self? They'll say, well, it's obvious. I feel like I'm a self. I think like I'm a self. There's this center of experience that feels like a separate self. But all of these things are feelings. They're the sense of separation, the sense of an I. And in various ways, these researchers and authors that I quote, they show you that this too is simply a creation, another hallucination. So even this feeling that we have, which kind of proves it, you know, well, of course I'm me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry, but that's just another belief, another hallucination. And I won't go into detail about what proves that, because that's what's in the book. But basically, coming to the 5th illusion, that's the subject-object relationship. And this is where science and what we learned in school, modern science, says, okay, I'm in here, I'm the experiencer, and there's a world of matter and physical objects out there that I have a relation to. So I see an object and I'm the perceiver of this object. And the object is physical matter.
Mm-hmm.
And what they're finding is that this doesn't hold up anymore. So the whole idea of matter, objects, and space and time are also constructs in how humanity perceives reality. So space and objects and matter and time are not actually out there. That's how our interface works. So here's where it gets really crazy, because what is out there then? Well, pure consciousness. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the hard problem of consciousness, but that is where neuroscientists are trying to find how the complexity of the brain creates consciousness in humans, for example. And this other philosophy, idealism, says, well, good luck with that. You're never going to find that, because what you're doing is you're looking in this interface metaphor, you're taking an icon on this interface, the human brain, and trying to, you know, explore it and find consciousness in there. But the whole thing is consciousness. So it's not that the brain, consciousness appears in the brain. The brain appears as an icon in consciousness. And there are various, not just, you know, nice philosophies about this, but really physics, modern physics, that has leaves scientists scratching their head, because, oh no, you know, what we've operated within as a paradigm is it's the other way around. And many don't want to go there yet, but it's changing. I feel like it's changing. In any case, for the illusion of the separate self, this is a big one, because this means it's not me versus the objects out there. It's just seamless. It's one vibrating field of consciousness, of which, and this is a great metaphor, I am a whirlpool in this multidimensional stream of consciousness, and I feel separate because this whirlpool is like consciousness turned in upon itself. So I reflect my own consciousness and therefore feel separate from the stream, but I'm not different than your consciousness. or, between us and between everything else. The whole thing is consciousness.
Yeah.
But this folding in on it of itself, of consciousness, makes us feel separate. And so the book ends with this, the sixth illusion is this illusion of primacy, which is kind of, well, yeah, but then I must be the one observing all this. So in many spiritual traditions, Buddhism also, there's this idea of, well, the ultimate witness or observer. And many of us have experienced that it's like there's an observer, observing my life. We have this sense of, well, that must be the I then. But we believe this observer is separate. So I have an observer and you have an observer. So the ultimate illusion is that, well, okay, then maybe I'm not the body. Maybe I'm not, this volitional organism. Maybe I'm something more intangible, but I am separate. And this last illusion says, no, sorry. There literally is not even a separate witness. There is only consciousness.
Very, very interesting, right? And very, very deep. So the first question that comes to mind is, and I can see when we talk about how difficult it is to communicate this out and get people to understand this, because it takes patience and practice to be able to get to that particular place. So what is the outcome, right? What do I get out of it if I would invest my time and effort into really understanding these 6 illusions and come to a level of acceptance? What makes my life better on the end of it?
At that level, on the one hand, I have to say nothing, because it is mental understanding. So just because you understand something doesn't mean it will change your life. And often it doesn't. But if you're lucky, it creates an opening to want to know, to want to experience something. And that's where it is possible, and these are the exercises in selfless leadership, for example, to see directly that what these scientists are talking about and this mental stuff, that it's actually true. If I look at reality without beliefs, I can see that there is no separate self. Why? Why does this help me? Well, it just removes my worry, my anxiety, my stress, and my suffering, which, if you think about it, is all about me.
Yeah.
Why do I worry? Well, because, my body is failing. Why do I worry? Because I'm not good enough, because I did something wrong. Or I worry about other people, but only in reflection towards me, right? I have a conflict with someone. Yeah, I'm not worried about that because of the conflict. I'm worried about that because it's about me.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing directly, if we can really get some direct taste of this, that the self is an illusion, these worries start to evaporate, because you really literally find yourself realizing, what am I worrying about? It's a construct. Why should I worry about my development if there's no volition? I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I'm the set of processes running in consciousness. It becomes almost ridiculous to think about a 5-year plan, or, I need to do something about this or that, because, well, I will or I won't. So there's a very different type of freedom that is very alien to the Western, developmental thinking. In Asia, in Eastern thought, it's more common to find this type of philosophy and way of approaching life. But it's not surrender, and it's not acceptance, and it's not giving up or a lack of discipline. It's none of these things. It's seeing that there is no one who needs to have these things.
It is very, very deep, right? It is certainly is a challenge, and I can see, it's funny because my son has recently picked up the Bible, and he's starting to, we're not coming out of a particular religious family, although I was born and raised Catholic in Holland, but he has read the Bible now probably half or more, or three-fourths of the way through it, and he comes to me and telling me all these scriptures and all these things. He said, and my first thing is, prove it to me. What is the fact? These are just stories that we're told over and over and over. These are perceptions that we have. These are things that people have written down from perceptions. But this is almost a little similar. Is that you really have to put yourself in a different place in order to really allow yourself to go to that, to experience it to the extent. So when you talk about the selfless and the 16, the steps that you talk about, this is not something that somebody can get to overnight, right? It is something that needs to come slowly over a period of time. And how would you propose somebody to tackle this and to really wrap their mind around that and to learn how to explore this?
Well, I've obviously thought about that a lot, and my answer changes. Whereas, I would have said, okay, if you're drawn to it, try these 16 exercises in selfless leadership, for example, or some of the recommended reading I have in Beyond Illusion. But it's also the case that if there is no separate doer self, right, you're going to do what you're going to do. And from a more metaphysical perspective, we could say that consciousness is expressing itself, is unfolding. We are expressions of this consciousness, of this unfolding. So there really isn't anything you need to do or can do. It is, you will be drawn to things. Some people will hear this and they'll say, wow, okay, this is fascinating. I want to know more. And they will read, or they will, I don't know, contact me or do whatever else they feel is appropriate. And others won't. Others will say, what a bunch of bull, and never think about this again. Equally interesting is that some people, and that was the case for me, if they hear this as a 30-year-old, it does nothing, and they're just like, okay, let me get on with my life. 10 years later, it's the most fascinating thing and the most important thing they've ever heard. So what I'm trying to say is that trying to structure this or make this into a list of things to do makes no sense.
Yeah. But it comes in time, right? As we change, let me put it in a different way. So I was always taught that, and as in my reading is that, we are based on our cultural experience, right? From birth, we are exposed to certain things, and that's deeply embedded in us. And that it really has nothing to do with us. It's just what we have. So it really is the culture that gives us the experiences. Out of those experiences, we take actions, life, and out of those actions, we have results. And it just becomes like a perpetual cycle over and over and over and over. And then if you want, if you really become conscious about that and say, listen, but I want a different result. I'm not happy with the result I have today. We have to break free from our culture, from the experiences, from the actions we've taken. And we have to shift that to open ourselves up to new experiences from which we can take action and maybe have different results, better or for worse, that matter. Does that click a little bit on how you look at this too? Is that if you want to get to that, you have to kind of look at it from a really very different perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. You will be looking at it from a different perspective because this is from everything we talk about, right? The culture and everything you just mentioned is in our minds. Whether those are in the brain or not doesn't make a difference, but in our thinking, things we've learned. But there is a part of us that observes or that is larger than this thinking. The only thing that this, the separate self illusion also shows us is that there is no I doing that. So I agree with that. We will have to look from a different perspective, but whether we do or not, that's open. I mean, that's not through a central control, center that is going to do this. And this is really the ultimate difficulty, I think, in this approach or this understanding is, in that sense, it is a complete letting go without an active component of that. So it is a seeing through that this whole construct of there being a me that does stuff, it goes up in smoke. So why am I saying this right now, right? Why are we talking? And the question of purpose and meaning and all this stuff. Well, it's just happening. So there's no, part of me that there's no thing going on inside, oh, this is really important and I need to get it right. And hopefully this will make sense. Does he understand? Do the listeners understand? It's all gone. And that's the freedom of it.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, similar is that, and I have not thought about it as deeply as you have, obviously, but for me too, I experienced this, right? I'm meant to be here in the moment, and it is and I take away from the things that you talk about that challenges me. And now the question, of course, once we conclude the conversation, how much sticks with me, right? How much more time do I continue to think about it? And that is really the challenge that I find in leadership development with folks is that, the brain wants to go solve problems because they get the greatest amount of satisfaction. And by the way, they love solving problems at the tip of the iceberg, not really at the root cause of any problem, because that takes real hard work to get there. But
Yeah.
we always talk about it. You really have to start at the beginning, and that's self-awareness, right? And my first question when I talk to clients is really, what is your why, right? And your why goes right back to the things you're talking about here a little bit. Is that what is your cultural background? Why is it that you are in healthcare? Why are you a nurse? Why are you a doctor? Why are you in this particular position? Why is this important to you? And again, people love to talk about what and how, but not really understand the why behind it. Why did they get there? And from time to time, we get to that point, and people just kind of scratch their head and say, I really don't like what I'm doing. I really don't feel passionate about the work that I'm doing. And, connecting the 4 Ps, right? Passion, purpose, people, and process is really, really important, right? A very small amount of people in the world actually get to do what they love to do, because they are in this machine, as you talk about, caught up in with other people, who's that, Andrew Tate calls it, I think, the matrix, that they caught up in, of just doing, rather than ever taking the time to take a step back and looking at it from a different point of view, and am I really connected to the things that I want to do? Yeah, listen, I think this is. I think the next thing for you is Oxford University teaching a philosophy class. I think that is the right place to be. So, what do you see that your next step is, Katrijn? What are you going to do next?
I have no idea. And less and less, I mean, that doesn't bother me anymore. It doesn't bother me that I have no idea. I have some ideas floating around, and maybe those will be pursued, maybe not. But this is also an example of stuff, we can get so stressed about what is the next thing to do. Even if I'm completely for, organic creativity. Oh, what is it that I need to create? I want to create. I should create. I don't know. We'll see. And then it's stress-free.
So let me ask you a follow-up question to that. So I would agree with that if you have, because we are stuck in the matrix in the sense that we have mortgages, we have food bills, we have medical bills. So how do you separate those two things, or the things that we need to do on a day-to-day basis in order to have, simple survival, and hopefully, better, more, a little bit more than that, by having a house, having kids, and feeling that true worry-free, right? That living the life that you're talking about.
By knowing beyond doubt that takes care of itself. So the body and the mind in this hallucination, right, in this illusion, they take care of themselves. So we've learned to think about things, and we've learned to believe that this thinking about things, this recursive or discursive thinking, solves problems for us. It doesn't. It is just an illusion within an illusion. So I call this a selfing app. Right? So it's like an app downloaded itself onto our system and now thinks about itself and believes this does something. The app is not even connected to the system. But it loves thinking. I mean, its whole focus is to think about things. And so whether I think about survival in any of its many forms or not, things just naturally work through me. I know that I need to think about, I need to have some form of financial security. Okay, this happens by itself. I mean, the planning for that, the working towards that, the making sure that that is okay. I don't need to think about that, or to think about it, right? I do need to think, obviously, but not about it. I don't have to worry about it, because it takes care of itself.
Yeah, so I mean, that goes then back to the real question, is that, and I think women do this more than men, and I would love to know why that is that what if, right? We tend to worry, instinctually speaking, about what if could, what could happen. And a lot of people never do things because they get stuck in the what ifs, right? Always worrying about what could happen, and 95% of things never happen. So it's all waste, and wasted time and effort and thought, of things that. So how do you look at that then?
Well, that's our conditioning. That's our collective situation at the moment. I think for many people, I don't know if it's a male-female thing. I think it's just a character thing, but I really don't know. The fact is that we learn from a young age to believe that our thinking is helpful. And one of the really freeing things is to see that it isn't. just to see directly, and these are these practices that I keep talking about, to see in your direct experience that whether you think about something or not makes absolutely no difference to the outcome.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think it's a perfect place to end, because I think that really is a good place for people to start thinking and maybe start experiencing that. So I would strongly encourage everybody to pick up both copies of the book and to take some time to read it and absorb it, and to be open-minded to this, this thought process, because again, like you said, it's not hard fact chiseled in stone, but certainly you can see what you're talking about makes sense, right? And I think that even if you only get a quarter of that, you can find maybe a calmer within self, right? I mean, that's really I think Buddhism, allows you to really to find that centered peace and letting go of the thoughts, and which only has helped me. And I have my two little Buddhas sitting in front of me over here, which I keep close to heart, and actually have a tattoo on my arm of that as well, to remember, and to remind myself of that. That is. Worrying is often a complete waste, and we have little control over that. And it's really, what I call the negative brain controlling me, which I should not allow, right? It is, and that. But listen, I look forward to having another conversation in the future. You're always a pleasure to speak with, and you're obviously very brilliant and bright. And I think a philosophy class somewhere to continue this stimulated conversation is something that is certainly worth it. So thank you very much. Any closing words for the audience?
No, just see where it takes you, and if you're interested, then follow that, and if not, that's fine too.
I think those are the wisest words. Really, is it allow yourself to experience things, right? And that is really the beauty about life. It is we have opportunities to experience new things. So again, thank you very much, and we'll talk soon again.
Thank you.
Thank you.